Well, it's like they say, it is that time of year. Hello everyone, Britton here, also known as Samoki Dude, and I am back here today with another video. And since I did my 2024 books I hope to read slash stuff I want to do on the channel, now it's time to do the books that I read during 2023 and really enjoyed. These are my top books and comics I read in 2023, so yeah, I'm really excited about this. Not really much else to say rather than I had a really great reading year in terms of all the books I read. There was a lot of really good ones I read, and the ones I really liked the most are going to be on this list. So yeah, I'm really excited to get that to you guys. I hope you guys' reading year was really good. Mine just was to the stratosphere, as they say. And I am looking forward to talking about all the books I really enjoyed. These are my top personal favorite books that I have read this year. The books that had the biggest impact on me personally. This is not a objective list of all time kind of thing. So, yeah. Without further ado, let's get into it. And before we get into this, I suppose I should mention the honorable mentions. These were the books that I really enjoyed and I had a lot of fun with, but they didn't quite make the cut. So, let's get to them real quick. So the honorable mentions I have here include The Killer Inside Me by Jim Thompson, The Thicket by Joe R. Lansdale, and The Ass Saw the Angel by Nick Cave. Yes, the same Nick Cave that is a musician. Tender is the Flesh by Augustina Bazterrica. Thank you, Jason, for showing me that book. Mr. Timothy by Louis Bayard. The Beast of St. Ender by Mats Evanson. Beyond Redemption by Michael R. Fletcher. Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. The Pale Blue Eye by Louis Bayard. Homicide, A Year on the Killing Streets by David Simon. Before They Are Hanged by Joe Abercrombie. Red Seas Under Red Skies by Scott Lynch. And a comic I had to throw in there, Bitterroot by David Walker, Chuck Brown, and Sanford Green, I think is the artist's name. So yeah, we got that out of the way. Let's get into the books that I have going for this year. So let's get to it. So now let's get on to the top 11 books I read during 2023. And why top 11? Because I like to go one step beyond. So let's get into it without any further ado. Book number 11 is The Vore by Brian Catling. I read it earlier this year, and it is easily the most unique and fascinating fantasy novel that I have read in some time. It is a novel that just completely exposes the lack of curiosity that is found in epic fantasy nowadays. It is not quite a masterpiece, though it comes very close to being one. It is not an American Gods or Perdido Street Station, but it definitely flirts with the things that made those two books so compelling. It is deeply unique, only follows its own rules. I mean, my God, I don't really know what else to say about the Vore. I mean, it's deeply compelling once you allow yourself to be taken into the forest, and with some exceptionally beautiful writing from Brian Catling, who is unfortunately no longer with us. I also read his final novel, Hollow, earlier this year, a little later on in the year, which I actually did a discussion with Raph from Raph Blue Text on the channel. I'll link that below if you guys want to check that out. But I personally preferred the Vore. I thought that the Vore's tropical setting, as well as its influences ranging from the Bible to Robin Hood to even Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, which is actually quoted at the beginning of this book. The Vore has been praised by Alan Moore as one of the best seminal fantasies of our age. And while I don't know if I would necessarily give the Vore that high of praise, it definitely kept me invested as I kept reading. It's a deeply sublime experience, so don't miss it. And number 10 is City of Thieves by David Benioff. Yes, the same David Benioff who helped write and completely botched the Game of Thrones adaptation, but do not be mistaken. It turns out that he can actually write pretty good novels when he's given the chance. I thought City of Thieves was a fantastic novel I read a little later in the year. I actually read it this last month, and I thought City of Thieves was fantastic, deeply touching, while also never shying away from the horrors of war, and somehow David Benioff managed to find a whimsical tone in one of the darkest periods of World War II, which is the Eastern Front, which, if you're well aware of your World War II history, most people would know was one of the most brutal and disturbing of the, aside from the Pacific campaign, was probably the most vicious fighting on any of the fronts. I mean, the Russians and the Nazis were ruthless towards one another. And Benioff never shies away from that, but he also tells a story of a beautiful friendship between these two main characters, and ultimately how one of them grows up as the story moves along. It's a beautiful story. Check it out. It's a fantastic novel. Number 9 is a novel that I read during a time where I was starting to fear that my more cynical friends who talked about fantasy just being the same thing over and over was being right. Well, that was until I read Panac by Susanna Clarke. Panac was, for lack of a better word, magical. It's really one of those few fantasy novels that really makes me think about the wonder of not just our world, but the wonder of the fantasy genre. Unlike Susanna Clarke's previous novel, which was The Doorstopper, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, Panac is a tight and tightly wound story about two men who live in this very strange labyrinth, and there are a lot of references to other literature, including the Chronicles of Narnia, if you're a fan of that. I loved how this story just moved along. I loved the mystery of it. It just enraptured me into its thrall, though it didn't quite meet the perfection, because I will admit it does wrap itself up a little too nicely. I don't want to say too much, because I am planning on having a chat about this novel with Laura and Colin in either a few weeks or sometime in the near future. But Panac was a fantastic novel, and easily one of the best fantasy novels I've read this year. I'm glad I waited till now to read it, because, man, this book was pretty popular on BookTube for a while, and it makes me more excited for when I try the Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, because I've been really excited to try that book for years, and I really enjoyed Panac a lot. I think it was a really good book, and I think you guys should go check it out. Number 8 is Gaveston by Nick Pizzolatto, and I bet you're wondering, is that the same guy who wrote True Detective? Why, if you can see right there, yes, it is the same guy. And let me tell you, his novel was fantastic. I wouldn't say it's quite as good as True Detective Season 1. I don't think anything is going to beat that. I mean, to be honest, that's probably his magnum opus, and I think even Nick Pizzolatto would acknowledge that True Detective Season 1 is his best work. But Gaveston was really, really good, and you can definitely see where he got some of the ideas that he would eventually use in True Detective Season 1, as well as in some of the other series. You know, there's a lot of world weariness, a lot of the characters with broken, flawed characters. The main character, Roy Cade is his name. Roy Cady, sorry. Roy Cady is the guy's name. And he is, as a matter of fact, he actually shares the initials with Rustin Cole from True Detective. This is a really well done, browbeat noir novel that I think should be read by anyone who is a fan of the genre. I mean, it is praised by Dennis Lehane, who, for my money, is the best crime writer living today. I think you should take his word for it. Gaveston is a fantastic read and shows that Nick Pizzolatto talent as a writer, his talent, I should say, was not a mere fluke with True Detective Season 1. He is a genuinely talented guy. Check it out. Number 8 is The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay by Michael Chabon, I'm not entirely sure. But this book was fantastic. A beautiful love letter, not just to the comic book medium, but also to the creative process, and also a discussion on why people are attracted to escapism. I thought this was a far more compelling book than, say, something like Ready Player One, which just spoon-feeds nostalgia while bringing up these interesting ideas and then never really doing anything with them. The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, I thought, was a deeply compelling and very entertaining read. This might be the most fun I had reading a book all year. There is a lot of Easter eggs for comic book nerds, but you don't have to be a big comic book nerd to appreciate this story. it's a beautiful story that combines whimsy and tragedy. There's a lot of stuff that happens in this book that are really quite heart-wrenching at points. Now, I will admit this would have been a 5-star, but I do think that the ending wraps itself up a little too nicely for my liking, and it also ended a lot better than it probably would have in the real world. But it does bring up a lot of prescient themes about why we create, why we want to escape, why we feel the need to escape, and also the joy that comes from creation. This is a fantastic book. I actually saw that another YouTuber and fellow Oklahoman, Robert from Punk Rock Cereal Bowl, actually covered this book on his channel. Ooh. So if he ever watches this, yo, bro, hit me up at some Okie Dude. We can discuss this book together. You know, I'm usually not busy. Let's get together. Seriously though, The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay are a fantastic read, and it's beautiful, and I love it, and it was everything I wanted it to be. Well, mostly, but you get the joint. Great stuff. Number 6 is from one of my favorites, and also, sadly, one who passed away in June of last year, and that is All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy. And one I would say is one of his more accessible ones. I mean, if you are a first-time reader of McCarthy, I definitely think you could get into All the Pretty Horses just fine. But this was one of those books I actually read, around this time last year, and, well, I really enjoyed it when I read it, but it just kind of stuck with me after I read it, you know, and of course it has all the great McCarthyism, great prose, great dialogue, beautiful descriptions of the landscapes. I mean, my God, I mean, the landscape descriptions in this are fantastic. But All the Pretty Horses is one of those books that really stuck with me as time went along. And I mean, while I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite McCarthy novels, I think it is still one that is very worthy of being discussed among his best. I mean, it's really well done, it's well paced, it's even quite funny at points, which is not something you would expect from McCarthy, well, unless you've read Suttree, but we won't talk about that just yet because, well, it's Suttree, so yeah, I don't want to get too much into that. But All the Pretty Horses I thought was a fantastic book. I think that everyone should go read it. It definitely is one of McCarthy's better novels, best novels, might even say. I really enjoyed it a lot. I think that All the Pretty Horses is well worth the read, and you really get to see a more whimsical side of McCarthy, kind of, even though there's still the really dark stuff. But, I mean, I already did a review of All the Pretty Horses, so I kind of already said what I needed to say about it, but fantastic book. Check it out. You won't regret picking it up. Now we're about to get to the real good stuff. Now we're getting into the 5-star reads, and my number 5 is Last Argument of Kings by Lord Grimdark himself, Joe Abercrombie. This book was one of those that really rocked my world. I mean, I knew Joe Abercrombie was fantastic. I loved the Blade itself. I really enjoyed Before They Are Hanged, and as a matter of fact, Before They Are Hanged was almost on this list, but then I decided to keep it one book per author, and I had to take it out because Last Argument of Kings is one of those books that is both thematically satisfying as well as deeply engaging on a personal level. Again, Abercrombie's reputation for being great with creating strange and interesting characters is, of course, precedes him. But Last Argument of Kings completely redefines the journey that we have taken so far and just completely flips the entire hero's journey arc on its ear. And what he does with it is fantastic. I love what he does with the ending of the characters. And while it might not be satisfying on a personal level, just the thematic symbolism of it all, just all the thematic just stuff that he's been playing with about being able to change, nature versus nurture, and all of this just wonderful themes and characterization he's been working with, and he finally brings it all to a close in Last Argument of Kings. I know it's alienated a few people who have read Last Argument of Kings, but I loved it. I thought it was a great book. and a fantastic read to end out Joe Abercrombie's First Law trilogy. Last Argument of Kings was a fantastic read, and I highly recommend you guys check it out. Number 4 is Killers of the Flower Moon by David Grann. I already did a review of this book, which literally got like -1 views on there. I mean, there was barely anyone who checked that review out, but I'm not salty at all. I'm totally fine. But this book was fantastic. I also have not really a personal connection, but it takes place in my home state, so I definitely wanted to check this out before too long. And I did see the film, and I thought it was pretty good, though I felt that the book was deeply compelling, as good as any crime fiction novel, except all that happens in this book really did happen, and a story that is timely, and I wish it wasn't, because there is a lot of really dark stuff about our history in this story that I think should be known, and I wish it was just a catalog of an age we can look back upon and think, wow, that was messed up. But sadly, we still live in a world where we are still exploiting our fellow man, and there are still racial dividers in this country that seek to split us apart rather than bring us back together. And Killers of the Flower Moon is a scathing indictment of a lot of that chicanery that happened in how greed can lead to evil, and how evil can lead to destruction of everything around it. David Grann is a fantastic writer. I can't wait to get into more of his books, because I think he's just a fantastic writer. And he managed to combine this almost poetic prose style with a very informative, with the really informative story. It was kind of like Into the Wild, which is one of my favorite nonfiction books of all time. I think that I wouldn't say that Killers of the Flower Moon lines up with that book, but in terms of like the emotion that I felt when reading Into the Wild, but Killers of the Flower Moon I thought was a fantastic book, and one that storytelling is really at the forefront. Check this book out. It is fantastic. Not really much else to say. Check it out. Number 3 is The Prophet by Michael Coriata, a novel that completely caught me by surprise with its emotional power. Now, I expected that I would enjoy this, considering that this is a noir novel about one of my favorite subjects, American football. But I just wasn't expecting the pure pathos that Michael Coriata creates with his characters, and this very raw exploration of, a raw exploration of grief, guilt, and trying to make up for the sins of the past, because there are, like, one of the kids, the story is about two brothers who had a horrible thing happen to them. Now, this is not a spoiler, this is explained in the very beginning. The two brothers, their sister passed away after she was brutally assaulted and murdered, and one of the brothers became a private investigator, a sort of burnout private investigator. He's kind of on the rocks, and he is never fully moved on from what happened to his sister, because he was supposed to pick her up that night when she died, and he didn't. And when he learned that she died, well, it kind of drove him to insanity almost. And the other brother became a football coach, and converted to Christianity, did the whole thing. He really cares about the kids. He mentions that a few times. Aside from the occasional repetition, The Prophet is a beautifully bittersweet crime tragedy that would do Dennis Lehane proud. And as a matter of fact, he's actually blurbed right there. And this definitely seems like a novel he would have written if he had gotten the idea. But yeah, The Prophet was a fantastic novel. Again, probably the most surprising book I read this year, because, again, I just was not expecting this book to hit me like it did. But check it out. And speaking of Dennis Lehane, number 2 is Mystic River by the man, the myth, and the legend Dennis Lehane. Mystic River is a revelation. I don't think that my initial review even did justice to just what this book did to me. This book is not merely an exceptional crime novel. It is a tragedy of Shakespearean caliber about these three men whose lives were altered by one event in their lives, and how the trauma of that event ultimately splintered down and ultimately made them worse as individuals. There's one who got, it also has one of the most heart-wrenching tragedies I have ever read in any type of novel with the character of Dave. He is just such a broken, sad character who, you just want to hug and tell him to go to therapy, because my God, the man needs it. He goes through the ringer in this story. But also the characters of Sean and Jimmy are also deeply complex and deeply compelling characters in their own right, with an ending that is both deeply sorrowful, but also rather fitting to the story Dennis Lehane is trying to tell. Again, this is not merely a phenomenal crime novel, even though it is. It is a tragedy. Please, please read Mystic River. It is a fantastic novel, and probably one of the best crime novels I have ever read. The people who call Mystic River his masterpiece, they are not lying. Well, what is your number one pick, one might ask? And let me tell you, I have already said it a few times, so you probably already know. But if you didn't know already, it is The Lies of Locke Lamora. I mean, this book had it all. It had great prose, great storytelling, amazing characters, and one of the most satisfying revenge arcs that I have ever read in my life. I mean, literally, I was reading the revenge arc, and I was just like, when I was reading it, I was just like, I was really pumped up, if you couldn't tell. It's very hard to get a visceral emotional reaction out of me, but this book made me audibly celebrate in several parts. I mean, if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. Lies of Locke Lamora is a fantastic book. It literally has everything you could ask for in a fantasy novel. Great world, great characters, great prose. I mean, my God. A great throwback to the adventures of Alexandra Dumas and Fritz Leiber. If you're a fan of Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, I think you would get a kick out of The Lies of Locke Lamora. Though I will say, John and Locke are a lot cooler than Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, because Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser are, well, they're kind of idiots. But The Lies of Locke Lamora is a fantastic novel, and Red Sea Under Red Sky is also very good too. But Lies of Locke Lamora is even better. Now I just have to wait for the fourth book, like everyone else now. It's a disappointment. But do read Lies of Locke Lamora while you're at it. It is a fantastic book, and I mean, I think George R. R. Martin put it the best best he could. Fresh, original, and engrossing, gorgeously realized, and I could not put it any better. Brian Bell, tell George that I agree with him about Lies of Locke Lamora. That's all I really got to say. Number one book of the year. Now let us move on to the best comics that I read this year. I got 6 that really stood out to me. That really didn't. I really did not mean for that to happen. That just kind of worked out in that way. But let's get into it. So number 6 I have is Middle West by Scotty Young. One I described as a Bradbury-esque fable of growing up in a really strange and bizarre fantasy world. The story's about this kid who runs away from home, and his just abusive jackass of a father, who's that guy. Turns out he has some magical power, and they don't really know what it is, and he's scared, and he ends up running off and trying to find out what this ability is. And it turns out that his dad might have the same ability. This comic, I've only read the first volume so far, but this comic had me glued from its strange world, its visual imagination, as well as the really, really well done storytelling from Scotty Young. I mean, the characters in this are very well done, even though we've barely just met them, and even though this is only the beginning that I have read, it is well worth the time. I really enjoyed reading this first volume, and I do hope to read more. So, yeah, Middle West was awesome. Go check it out. Comic number 5 is Beasts of Burden by Evan Dorkin and Jill Thompson. This was a fantastic comic. If you're a big fan of Scooby-Doo as I am, this is basically like Scooby-Doo and Hellboy brought together, and it is a fantastic comic that I read this year. This was one that my comic book shop guys were really getting after me to read, and I finally did. And let me tell you, it was fantastic all the way through. These are really episodic, so it's not really a story per se. I mean, there is a deeper story going on, but this is mostly episodic, so you can enjoy all of these stories on their own. But some of the stories in this, particularly a dog and his boy and Lost, really tug at the heartstrings. And Jill Thompson's art, let me just say, my God, they are so good. I mean, look at this. It's beautiful. Watercolor. That watercolor is so nice. I mean, my God, it's so atmospheric, too. Hold on, let me just look at that. Look at that. It's just, oh, it's so atmospheric. And I think that Beasts of Burden is a comic that you guys should not be missing out on. It is genuinely a really good piece of sequential art. I think that this is one that you guys should check out, and is one that's actually pretty underrated. I think this one should be talked about more. But thank you to the guys at New World Comics for recommending this comic to me. This one was really good, so yeah, check this one out. Number 4 is a series that I actually continued in 2023, and that is Criminal by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. I mean, what can I say about this series that hasn't already been said? I mean, this is a masterful noir tale, noir series from the minds of two of comics' most gifted creators. I mean, Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips work on such a level that it's almost like they're psychically connected to each other. They just understand each other so well. I mean, Ed Brubaker's great writing, along with the exceptional artwork from Sean Phillips. I mean, look at that. I mean, even in its early stages, before they really found their groove, I mean, look at that. And they really started out with a bang with Coward, but I also read Lawless and The Dead and the Dying, and both of those were really good as well. Though I do prefer Lawless, because I thought that one was really good discussion on the cyclical nature of violence and how violence often is passed down from one generation to the next. So I'm surprised Dennis Lehane hasn't read this series. I think he would get a big kick out of it because they deal with similar themes. I mean, Sean Phillips' artwork, along with the colors in this, my God, it's so good. I mean, you know, it's not Elizabeth Braithwaite, but, I mean, it's very close. I think that just Brubaker and Phillips are a fantastic team when they're together, and I think that Criminal is one of their best works together, and it was their first major collaboration. Well, I think either their first or second one. I'm not entirely sure. Correct me in the comment section if you know any more. But Criminal is a fantastic series, and I hope to keep going on with it in 2024. My number 3 comic of this year is another one I continued. It is Black Hammer from Jeff Lemire, which, for my money, might be the most thorough exploration of the superhero genre I have seen since Alan Moore's Watchmen, and I do not say that lightly. This comic is not as political or as prone to logical extremes as Moore's seminal work is, but Black Hammer's references to the genre, as well as its meta storytelling, really do harken back to Moore's seminal work. I just kind of redundancy there. But this book does manage to separate itself from Moore's famous work by being something of its own. It's not trying to deconstruct superheroes. It's not trying to reconstruct them. It's more of what would superheroes be like. And not really in the real world, but they definitely deal with more real-life problems. I mean, you definitely could say this is a reconstruction of the superhero genre. Lemire and Ormston are really good together. Ormston brings this Jack Kirby quality to his artwork. I mean, look at that. Very Kirby-esque. It's very blocky. And I really enjoy how they do that. How Ormston illustrates. I think he's really good. But Jeff Lemire it's also just a great story on its own. The mystery is really compelling. The characters are very strong, as is part of the course of a Jeff Lemire comic. And while the ending does get a little bit into that kind of Grant Morrison-y meta weirdness, it never loses track of its heart, and I really enjoy that about Black Hammer. I think Black Hammer is a really good comic for those who are interested in something different. When you want, if you're kind of sick of Marvel and DC and want something different that's not Invincible, I would heavily suggest checking out Black Hammer. It is a fantastic series, and it might be one of the best things Jeff Lemire has ever done. I really do think so. Is it his magnum opus? No, I probably would say Sweet Tooth is his magnum opus, but I love Black Hammer a lot. I think it is really up there with stuff like Watchmen and DC: The New Frontier from Darwin Cook. Yeah, Black Hammer I almost said, I was spewing up words there. It is phenomenal. Check out Black Hammer. Fantastic comic. Not really much else to say there. Excuse me there. But yeah, check out Black Hammer. Great stuff. Let me tell you guys, it was really tough putting this on number 2. If I had not read the number 1 comic that I'm going to be talking about, this definitely would have been number 1. And I know I can see the eye rolls right now, but my number 2 pick is Saga from Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. Now, again, I can see the eye rolls, I can hear the groaning, I can hear the, clicking of the teeth, but I am not kidding. Saga is the shit. Like, it really is. Like, you guys should check out Saga as soon as possible. Not only is this one of the best comics I have ever read in my life, it just constantly upping the stakes. I love how Brian K. Vaughan can combine these really relatable human moments with the most absolute bonkers concepts that you can think of. I mean, sextillion. Oh, God, I have to laugh at the absurdity. This comic should not work, and yet it does. And I finally caught up to where it had taken a break. And once I got to issue 54, I witnessed one of the most shocking moments I have ever seen in a comic in my life. This comic is brilliant. I love Saga so much, and going and catching up has only solidified Saga as being one of the best comics of the 21st century, and easily might be one of the best comics of all time. Brian K. Vaughan is a genius, but I can't just lay all the groundwork, all the praise on him. There's also Fiona Staples' artwork, which I'm going to try and not get to the real explicit stuff, because this is not a series for children, but, like, look at that artwork. It is so good. Like, my God. Like, look at that spread page. Oh, my gosh. I mean, let me find some other non-explicit, This is gonna be tough. No, not that. I'm on Sextillion. God, this is tough. Okay, here's one. Right here is really good, but man, Saga is so good. And again, I got to issue 54, which was the last part of volume 9. Shocked me to my very core, which if you've already read up to that part, then you probably saw that a few years ago and probably like, really? You got there now? Dude, I can't afford all these comics, okay? I have to wait, all right? It's tough. It's tough being in this scenario, but okay, I'm going on a gush rant too long. Saga, check it out. It is a masterpiece. The hype is certainly warranted. So we are here. What could possibly, I bet some of you are probably asking, what could possibly top Saga? Like, everyone loves Saga. Shouldn't Saga be your number 1 pick? And I know what you're thinking. I mean, look, I promise you, it hurt to put Saga at number 2, but it could not lend a handle to a manga, as a matter of fact, which is even more shocking and exasperating to me, but that is Pluto from Naoki Urasawa. He has made it to my favorite comic 2 years in a row now. Last year, my favorite comic was Monster, and this year it is Pluto. Pluto is yet another masterpiece from the mind of Naoki Urasawa. I mean, I did just do a review on this manga not too long ago. But it is science fiction as it ought to be. It is engaging, it is thoughtful, and entertaining. It also explores trauma and how trauma can just completely destroy your life. It doesn't matter if you're human or robot. It also discusses what makes us human, as you ought to do if you are going to write about AI and humanity and all that fun stuff. There's also some political commentary snuck in there about the Bush administration. This was written in the early 2000s, after all. But Naoki Urasawa is a master storyteller. He is a master of creating these vivid, alive characters, and he is a master of realistic-looking art. I mean, my God, I did watch the anime this year, and fantastic as well. Fantastic adaptation. It's just a beautiful story all around. It's a beautiful story about what makes us human, and how robots and how androids in this world really deal with that, and how they deal with ultimately gaining humanity. Again, it's a beautiful story, and again, look at the artwork from Naoki Urasawa. I know my phone isn't really that good. I hope you guys can see that okay. I do wish it was in color, because my God, I've said it before, I'm going to say it again, I wish Naoki Urasawa's art style is in color. It's not. It's really frustrating. But Pluto really etched out Saga, because it really left an even more profound emotional effect on me. I mean, the North 2 arc and the first trade has the best story arc, and it's only like a mini arc. Like, it is insane. Pluto is yet another masterstroke from Naoki Urasawa. I have been taking a break from Urasawa since then, but I can't wait to hop back into his work, because, man, he has 2 bangers in a row now, and I will say I do prefer Monster, but I think Pluto is well worth the read. Again, it did really hurt. And I switched it out a couple times. I was really tempted to put Saga at number 1, but Pluto is finished. That's really the thing it came down to. And but yeah, my number 1 pick is Pluto. Fantastic manga, fantastic comic in general, because manga's comics. We don't judge around here. Yeah, great stuff. Check it out. Well, that is it in terms of all of my favorite comics and all of my favorite books that I read in 2023. Hopefully this video doesn't go too long, though probably already has. But, as always, if you guys enjoyed this video, check me out on Twitter, Samoki Dude. You can check me out on Letterboxd and Goodreads, where I write reviews that are probably more coherent than the one you just heard right now. And you can also find me on Discord if you want to come hang out with me, talk to me, chill out with me. But yeah, tell me what some of your favorite books were in 2023. I would love to hear from you guys. Or even favorite films. I don't care. I don't discriminate on this channel. So yeah, feel free to let me know what you all thought of this list. If you guys are interested in checking any of this stuff out, I do recommend all of you check this stuff out, because these books are fantastic. But I will see you guys later, and until then, take care, everyone. Bye.